Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome all of you to this very special session at the World Knowledge Forum. I'm Jong-ha Lee. It's my pleasure and privilege to moderate this session that commemorates the 300th birth anniversary of Adam Smith. The title of the session is Techno Big Bang and Challenges for Global Economy. Adam Smith, the 18th century philosopher and the father of modern economics, believed in economic freedom and market economy. He described self-interest and competition in a market economy as the invisible hand that guides the economy. Smith argued that free market system, along with the free trade, would produce national wealth, benefiting all social classes, not just the privileged few. On the other hand, Adam Smith was constantly concerned about the rise of the cooperative power, monopoly, and oligopoly. He wrote that when people of the same trade meet together, their conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public or in some plans to raise prices. So in today's session, we'll discuss the challenges confronting the global economy with a special emphasis on the impact of the big technological innovations. New technologies such as artificial intelligence, AI, and robot undoubtedly have a profound impact on the global economy. We expect that Techno Big Bang enhance the productivity and human welfare. However, despite that significant opportunities brought about by the technological revolutions, new technologies also introduce significant challenges. For example, there are concerns about widening income inequality as well as the destroying jobs due to new technologies. There are also concerns about the unregulated use of the AI and new technologies can result in market distortion and the failure and the dissemination of false information and the concentration of power. So as Adam Smith knew 300 years ago, there are opportunities and challenges from big companies getting bigger. So today we'll hear the insight to famous distinguished Nobel Prize laureate. It's sitting beside the two Nobel Prize winning economists was a very rare opportunity for me. So Paul Romer is currently a university professor in economics at Boston College. He received the 2018 Nobel Prize in economics for his work in endogenous growth theory. So basically, he is an advocate for technology-driven economic growth. And then Abhijit Banergee is currently the Ford Foundation International Professor of Economics at MIT. Banergee received the 2019 Nobel Prize in Economics for experimental approach to alleviating global poverty. So these two great economists will share their insight on the technological development and the challenges for the global economy. The key questions we discussed are: what are the most significant challenges facing the global economy? What are the major opportunities and challenges from the new technologies? And what should government and businesses do to meet current and future challenges? So we have about 60 minutes. I'm sorry for this delay, but we'll have 60 minutes, and we'll first hear their opening remarks for about 5 to 7 minutes from each of them. And then after the remarks, we'll have ample time for discussion, and then maybe we can have Q&A from the floor too. So let's begin with Professor Paul Romer. Please welcome him with big hands.
The insight that formed the basis of my first 10 years of work in economics and was the basis for the prize was, in its most fundamental terms, the recognition of the distinction between objects and ideas. And the recognition that because of their different characteristics, the economic systems we use to produce and distribute scarce objects will have to be different from the ones that will be best suited for the production and distribution of ideas. Now, I think we're all aware in this world of rapid technological change that it is ideas, new discoveries, new ways to do things, new ways to make things and use them, that drives progress, that creates opportunity, that leads to new firms that are very successful. The key distinction between an idea and an object is that it can be shared. And this has very beneficial implications for all of humanity. And it also means that we benefit from the presence of other people. If we live in a world of just 100 people, it's very unlikely that someone will be specialized in discovering a vaccine that will protect us from disease. If we live in a world of billions of people, it's very likely that someone in the world will be solving that problem of finding the right formula for a vaccine that will protect us. And once that formula has been discovered, we can all benefit from the use of the vaccine produced according to that formula. So we benefit from the presence of other people because we can share ideas. And this is fundamentally the source of the gains from trade that economists since Adam Smith have been thinking about. But it's important to recognize that there are steps in this chain between the discovery of an idea by one person and then its use by others. One issue that I became increasingly concerned about when I started working at the World Bank, which is like many large organizations, was that it's not enough to have an idea in your head. You have to codify it in a way that makes it possible for other people to read it. And we can put more or less work into codifying an insight. If we put more work into it, it will be easier for other people to read, more likely that they actually absorb it and turn it into an insight in their brains. And because of the nature of the process, we tend to systematically underinvest in the work required to communicate an idea. If I write a paper that 10,000 people will read, the total time spent in communicating ideas will go down if I spend 5,000 minutes improving the paper in a way that reduces the time it takes for other people to read it by just 1 minute. So there's a very strong burden on everyone who writes documents, and if you're in an organization, on everyone who supervises people who writes documents and who share information. There's a strong requirement that we insist on clarity in the communication of ideas. Now, the further problem is that you can write things down that are not true. We can share things that are not true, and sometimes it's in our interest to do that. We might be tempted to inflate what we've accomplished, inflate what our team has done, mislead about a mistake we've made. And so to effectively share ideas, we need not just clear codification, but also a commitment to verification of the clear statements that someone makes, and then reputations that are adjusted on the basis of that process of verification. This was really the foundation of the system of science that was emerging when Adam Smith first wrote. It involved not just this principle of the reputational integrity was critical to the weight that you put on any information you heard from someone else, but it also involved a kind of discourse amongst scientists that involved lots of attentions to specifics. because it's the specifics that you can check. The big, grandiose pondering of the nature of the universe doesn't lend itself to the kind of verification that all of those specifics do, so that it means that the facts and our attention to the facts and the description and transmission of evidence is critical, not just because the facts discipline our otherwise kind of untethered thoughts, but the facts are the basis for checking each other and developing reputations and then therefore being effective in communicating information. So what worries me the most right now about the future? I'm very worried about an erosion that I think is clear in the United States, I think in other advanced economies, in the degree to which people care about maintaining a reputation for being honest and reliable, for telling the truth. This became a very strong concern in Adam Smith's era, and the new emerging system of science helped encourage that focus, that integrity was an extremely important part of your ability to function in the world. If you think about a technology sector that lives by the slogan, "Fake it until you make it," you realize we've moved into a brand new world. And in the United States, we have political leaders who lie flagrantly, blatantly, repeatedly, explicitly, in ways that are easy to verify. So I worry about a future where people in general don't care about whether the person they're listening to is consistently careful about trying to say what's true. Rather, what they care about is this person a celebrity? And I like hearing from a celebrity. So lots of people try to become celebrities, try to get attention, and don't worry about maintaining this reputation for integrity. Because if that becomes the dominant ethos in society, it could erode this special ethos in science that functions only if people care about reputations for integrity when they share information. And it could erode our ability to transact and to operate in a modern economy. I think we rely much more on trust in the economy, not just in science, but in the economy and in organizations than most of us realize. And if trust erodes, we will be much the worse for it. Now, how governments address this is a very important topic, and we can come to that later. But I think what you might think about as individuals is, how do you operate in a world where some people still care about whether or not you're a person of integrity, but some people don't? And how do you manage a team or an organization where there might be a well-established culture of trust and a commitment to integrity, or there might be an erosion, a loss of trust along these lines? Let me just say that the last comment is that if you go back and look at Adam Smith's book, he wrote words in a language like English that had an alphabet, and that was the main mechanism for communication. Later, economists developed what computer scientists call a domain-specific language, mathematics. So we now communicate with each other partly with words, but partly with mathematical symbols, because they're good at communicating certain ideas. And there are related languages like the language of tables and graphs and so forth, and numbers. We're making a transition into a new world where there will be a new domain-specific language, code. People are going to write code, and code will not just be something that spits out an answer. Code will be something that we write and read to communicate subtle ideas with each other, which we can't capture very well with words or with math. But this world of code is one where we often don't know who the author is. We get too many digital messages now, code and digitized messages. We get too many messages where we no longer know who the author is. And this is further eroding this basic principle on which I think everything turned in the past, which was know who you're dealing with, know what their reputation is, and don't listen to them if they've developed a reputation for being unreliable. Too many people today accept information in digital form where they have no idea who is behind it and what reputation that person may or may not have maintained. So the technology is, I think, contributing to this. It's not just the shift towards celebrity culture and social media, but it's also the anonymity of digital communication. And this is actually something that I'm working on very intently right now. We need to move to a world where we don't open any digital file unless we know who it's from, and it's from someone we trust. We're not there yet, but we can use code and technology to get there, and that's my mission in the next several years. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I think it's these new ideas, new knowledge, and new technologies clearly benefit the world economy, and it can be shared very quickly through the internet and through digital method compared to the past. But as he mentioned that now it's not just the right idea, the bad ideas can be shared very quickly. We don't know what is the right one. I mean, that's the clearly challenge to the our society at this moment. It could create a lot of problems. I think we can hear later more about how we could solve these problems and then what he is doing actually to solve the problems. So let me invite our second speaker, abhijit Banergee. Please give him big hands.
Thank you. I started with since Paul is famous for his work on how new ideas have transformed the world, I assumed that he would be explaining and maybe saying things in conveying the excitement about this moment in history when there is clearly an explosion of new technology that's everybody's talking about, in particular about AI. But actually multiple technologies are changing at this point, and that's exciting. I'm not the right person to talk about that excitement. It's not what I have done. It's worth, I think, both acknowledging that there is huge amount of excitement in the world, that there are sort of speculation about how productivity growth will go up very fast and in the next 10 to 20 years as AI gets adopted, and how that will transform the economic landscape. For where I look at, I'm an economist who studies poverty. It seems to me that for the very poor in the world, this may indeed be good news. I think there are at least two reasons why that might be the case. One is that education is extraordinarily unequally distributed. And that's becoming more and more unequal. There's an article in yesterday's New York Times about what it takes to get into elite universities. And I think the core fact is that if you get the same SAT score, so your history of performance as measured by some objective measure are exactly identical, but you are from the top 1%, you have a 2.7 times as big a chance of getting in to the top university as the average. And if you're you are from the bottom 20% of the income distribution, you're 20% less likely to get in than the average. So in other words, we are in this world where the access to elite knowledge is extremely rationed, and you know that in Korea, the world of competitive exams, anxieties, all of this is not unrelated to that question of access to elite education. One thing that AI can in principle do is widen the access massively. It will require institutional changes, which universities are very slow to do. We have a small piece, and maybe if we come to that, I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do, but we have a small piece of an effort to try to get around that. But the institutional structures are very committed to keeping knowledge, the monopoly of knowledge, and in elite institutions are particularly defensive about it. So, but it's an interesting moment. I think at least for high school education and maybe even for primary and secondary education, generally there might be the use of AI, use of interactive learning. I think what AI allows is a massively upgraded interactive experience. If you don't understand something, AI can spot what you don't understand and provide you with the answer. So it can be a much more dynamic process of online learning. So this is one hope. The second hope is healthcare. I think much of the world has very indifferent healthcare, and I even that's true in, of course, in the poorest countries in the world, but even in middle-income countries, it's one thing I have studied, and the access to the quality of healthcare you get access to is miserable. The average person treating somebody in India or China is more likely to get the answer wrong than to get it right. That's a number to keep in mind. So you can imagine enormous amount of leverage you can get from a knowledge base where you can sort of take a picture of somebody, take their few of the vitals, send it up and get an answer which is more reliable for sure than the average healthcare provider provides. So I do think that there is, even for the world's poorest, I think there's clearly a promise. Where I think the biggest, actually the economic impacts will be negative is with the middle classes. I think if you think about what's a middle class job in India? What's a middle class job in the Philippines? What's a middle class job in Cote d'Ivoire? It's BPOs. It's some form of taking work off rich countries and doing it cheaper. These are jobs like medical transcription. It's like low-level animation. These are jobs that AI already can do better, and these jobs will all vanish. So I think in poor countries or middle-income countries, the middle-class jobs are about to go, and they may or may not want to face up to it. They haven't quite yet, but it's I think I don't want to make many global predictions, but this one I think is fairly evident. The corresponding thing is middle-skilled jobs, so lower middle-income people in countries like the US. That's the accountant who is not a very specialized accountant but does sort of routine accounting. AI can do that better. It's that kind of job will also disappear. I think the sense that yes, there'll be other jobs created is true. I'm sure new jobs will be created, but it's not clear to me that those jobs will be that skill using, because most skills that most people in their lifetime can master are actually pretty mundane skills. It's very hard to transform your skill set extensively. And then therefore, I think a lot of middle-income people will actually either have to find jobs that are less exciting and less interesting than what they've been doing, or be unemployed. And I think that this politically and from a welfare point of view, these are major threats. And I think when I say this, I often am told that, look, the Industrial Revolution destroyed a lot of jobs, but eventually it was fine. It's true, but it took about 75 years for wages to catch up. 75 years of 40 years of flat wages in the US brought Trump. 75 years of lower wages, we don't know what the political consequences are, but I don't want to think about them. So I think this, as an entry point to this conversation, let me say that I'm pretty frightened. I say this everywhere, that I think we are A, frightened, and B, not really very well equipped to deal with what AI is doing to the world, because we haven't even actually understand how we could regulate it or what would be valid regulation. So I think we're in a place where it's intellectually, in a sense, exciting. I'm excited by what Paul was saying about trying to do something about it. And on the other hand, I think it's also a time for all of us to be concerned, all of us to think about it.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee. I think you gave a very frightening picture of the future of the AI technology, especially it could hurt middle-class people. We heard that pessimistic view even 10 years ago. People gave the predictions that this AI can destroy many jobs and then increase unemployment. But the future research is following that kind of predictions show that the impact was not that large. So we can see, because somebody really say this is a very early stage of the new technological development, especially in the AIs. So maybe we are now in the 1/5 of on the way of the, let's say, general intelligence, artificial intelligence. Then for the next stage, what will happen? This is probably it will be very difficult to predict. So I would like to ask you to a little bit more elaborate that.
Yeah,
and then what would be if you are right, what should we prepare from now on to prevent the disasters?
Let me say two things. I think that if you look at it takes a while. People lose jobs. When they lose jobs, they stick around. The entire local economy goes into decline. This is what we've seen with the China trade. The China shock, the effect of the China shock didn't show up immediately. It showed up 10 to 15 years after the first shock hit. And you see that in the US, among the white population, for the first time since 1919, life expectancy has been falling every year, year on year, every year. From 1919, every year, and it's not the pandemic, it's life expectancy is falling now that nobody is dying from. It's the death of despair. So I want to say that I think one shouldn't underestimate how large these shocks can be. Second thing I want to say is that, in fact, AI is, of course, not a well-defined category. We already had AI many years ago. And if you look at the industries where you would predict AI adoption would be higher, those industries have had less wage growth and less employment growth than others. So I think if you do the current comparison, even looking backward, you see that it's not a huge effect, but I don't think anybody expected it to be a huge effect. I think what we are seeing now will be a set of, the problem with AI was that it was mostly embedded in technologies. Now it's going to be accessible to many people to use. That's what has changed. With ChatGPT, what's changed is the interface, not really the deep technology. The large language models kind of already existed. I think that I don't think we have had much of a, to the extent we've seen exactly the negative results we expected, but I don't think they have been big because AI wasn't big. I think it's going to be big now.
Okay, so let me get to the Paul. You want to say something about this negative impact of AI on employment?
Yeah, what's kind of interesting is both Abhijit and I am a little bit pessimistic right now, but I want to distinguish there's two kind of somewhat distinct issues that worry us. One is, I agree with his description, but the assumption that AI might lead to, say, better diagnosis of disease and then better treatment, that's predicated on the assumption that these AI systems actually give us the right answer. And right now, these systems just come up with things that sound plausible, and they often can they make up things that are completely untrue. So I have a deep concern that the tendency people have to be dishonest could be amplified by a way to seem plausible, but to get away with dishonesty. If you were following things in the United States, there was a woman named Elizabeth Holmes who tried to start a huge company that was going to do blood diagnostics, and it was all fraud. You can imagine someone like that selling these systems that they send out into the field to do diagnosis, and where it's actually not getting the right answers. So those are the kinds of issues that worry me. Now, if we solve those, Abhijit's raised a second question, and I think the thoughtful economists agree on this, which is that it may be that when it's constrained to make sure that it gives us the correct answers, these machine systems might be able to do things that people used to do, and that would reduce the demand for people to do those jobs, and this could be harmful for some period of time for wages and income. I think this is a very real concern. There is a separate concern that some people in Silicon Valley have, that AI will become so smart that it will like become our rulers and like lock us in the basement and make us into prisoners or something. I don't know how they get to that kind of part of their thinking, but
they read a lot of science fiction.
Yeah, I think that I noticed at the bank, a lot of people want to worry about problems that we don't yet have, because then they don't have to rely on any facts. They can just make them up. Well, it's going to be like this and that. I think we need to focus on the problems we have. But the problems we have involve income inequality, which has been increasing, and as Abhijit said, especially in the United States, really serious, something's gone seriously wrong with our ability to translate more GDP per capita into longer, successful lives. If you look at the United States compared to South Korea or European countries, for a couple of decades, the United States has been stagnant in terms of life expectancy, while South Korea, for example, has just gone powering up with longer and longer lives. Then, as Abhijit said, in the United States, it's actually started to fall. But for a couple of decades, we were already falling behind the progress you see all around the world. So something's gone seriously wrong in the United States on this dimension, and we need to understand what it is. I think the China shock, the erosion of manufacturing jobs, is a candidate here. I also think that it's possible that a dishonest businessman actually contributed to this as well by adopting a business model of getting people addicted to opioid-based painkillers. Yes. And that this has really had profound effects in terms of loss of life, loss of ability to function, addiction. So this is a more general warning that other technologies, like just new pharmaceuticals, not just software, new technologies can sometimes be beneficial, sometimes can be very harmful, and we need governments that are strong enough to say, oh, you can use the good ones, but no, you can't have a business where you addict people and kill them to make billions of dollars. And this is a more common problem than we like to admit. If you think back to the 1980s, we had a class of chemical compounds called chlorofluorocarbons. The people who developed them and were selling them in chemical companies were not bad people. They weren't trying to, do something like this opioid guy did. But it turned out that those chemicals were destroying the ozone layer and really threatening life on Earth. So at that time, the government of the United States, under Ronald Reagan, said, no, you can't sell chemicals that are going to destroy life on Earth. And other countries around the world had governments that also said, yeah, we're going to agree to that and do that. I'm worried that our governments have lost that capacity to say no to things that are things that are harmful. But to go back to the narrower question, even if we can say no to the opioids, we're still going to face this problem of some workers who've had stagnant wages and living lives of despair. And I think as professionals in economics, we need to take much more seriously the question of what practical measures can countries use to achieve at least a kind of a stable distribution of income, so that everybody is seeing some percentage increase on average in their income, rather than having a few go surging ahead and the rest be left behind. I think we've often paid lip service to this and often said something like, well, a government could just use taxes and transfers to achieve income inequality. Politically, it's very difficult to achieve transfers in any democratic society. And we need to be much more, I think, attentive to the practical details of how can we make sure that we create social environments where everybody feels like they have a stake in the progress that the good discoveries could bring.